Okay.
And welcome back to Morning Show. We have with us today Kobus, who is the DA Shadow Minister of Defense and Military Veterans. Kobus, you watched some of our videos last week, and you decided to fact check us on things that we got wrong. Hello, Kobus. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning to your listeners. Good morning to Ramon. It's really a privilege to be on your show.
Thanks very much. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. The first is we're going to talk about the Russian ship that docked in the DA territory. What can you tell us about the ship?
Well, that was a very interesting and still remain a very interesting and mystery. What happens in the Western Cape. It's not so about much about the DA in the Western Cape, but it's about the Simonstown Naval, which is our biggest naval base in South Africa. It's the national strategic key point. It is not an official point of entry for any commercial cargo or passengers. So it is not a generally a customs attended point of entry. So that obviously has made it very very interesting. The fact that we know that the Lady R is a Russian vessel that is on the sanction list of the UA, the UK, and the European Union. The vessel is apparently known for transporting of munitions, from the East Bloc, and it might be Russia, Bulgaria, wherever, and African nations, and obviously other partners of the Russian Federation. So we know that it stopped at I think it was Gambia or Cameroon, and then at that stage it was coming down the Atlantic Ocean, west coast of Africa. Around about St. Helena Bay, the transponder, the AIS, was switched on, and it was sailing past Cape Town, and it laid on anchor on just next to the Agulhas Bank for a couple of days. Now, my information is that apparently, I can just mention at that stage, the final destination was not given South Africa, but was given Dar es Salaam. My information is that the initial plan for the vessel was to dock in one of the Portnet harbors. The expectation is that it's probably Cape Town or Port Elizabeth, Kucha, or Durban. And my information is that Portnet refused them entry into their ports. So that's obviously why it had to lay on anchor for about 3 to 4 days for further instructions. We also know that when the vessel was sailing into Simonstown and False Bay, the AIS was switched off. The vessel was accompanied by two naval vessels, the new multi-mission inshore patrol vessel, as well as one of the frigates. Both their transponders were on while sailing into Simonstown. So obviously that was on the Tuesday evening, late afternoon, early evening. That night they started with midnight activities with spotlights being on and things being loaded off the vessel. Then, funny enough, the next day there was silence on the pier, and the trucks with containers were parked outside at the sports grounds of the Navy and were guarded during the day. And then similarly, that was repeated on the Thursday. And during Wednesday night and Thursday night, again, a beehive of activity, which obviously posed a question. So, what is going on? Why is this happening? I have tried immediately to get hold of the Minister, Secretary of Defense, the Chief of the Navy. I was then referred, basically from the Secretary of Defense to say, contact the Chief of the Navy. He would know. I was told that he briefed the Chief of the SANDF and the Chief of Joint Operations on the vessel's visit to Simonstown. I haven't received any feedback at that stage from the minister, and was initially told that by the Friday there would be a statement issued. That obviously immediately posed a question. So when is the vessel going to leave Simonstown? Probably then, Thursday evening or night, or Friday morning very early. So obviously Friday morning daybreak, I immediately got the information that the vessel is leaving the port, and I got my photos as it was basically sailing into the distance, and again then laid on the Agalas bank for a couple of days, and then suddenly, the destination changed from Dar es Salaam to Istanbul, and starting to sail up the east coast, and quite clearly with the objective to go via the Suez Canal, and then from Istanbul back to the Black Sea, where it originated from. So that obviously caused a major lot of questions, and I've been inundated with queries, with information. I used my own intelligence sources. I knew by that Wednesday already that Armscor was involved, and I know that Armscor is the acquisition agent for the South African National Defence Force. I have tried to look at the NCACC reports that we get on a quarterly basis and a yearly basis, whether there were any permits issued for imports from Russia. I recall a couple of months ago when John Steenhuisen put a question to the Minister of Defence whether there were such transactions. She was very, kind of stayed away and didn't commit or confirmed anything or denied anything. I found a permit that was issued in 2020 for rounds or shells, as they described it or defined the order. And then I know that those trucks were organized also by Armscor's logistic company called AB Logistics. So by that Friday morning, very early, obviously the trucks left Simonstown as well. And during the day, I immediately and continuously knew where the trucks was heading, and I expected the trucks to drive over the weekend. But on Saturday morning, I got the information that the trucks arrived at the ammunition depot in Limpopo. 7 containers was delivered there, and the trucks was again heavily guarded within the ammunition depot. So we were quite busy, and we were quite pose a lot of questions. If this is legitimate, and if this has been done in a regular fashion, why all the secrecy and why all the silence? So, and that obviously, the longer they wait to respond, the more interest it generated, not only with us, but with news media and also the rest of the world. America, I'm sure, have informed the government that the Lady R was on her way to South Africa, and I can assume that there was a bit of trade pressure, most probably on Portnet, not to accept the vessel, which obviously, and then most probably had an effect of it being eventually going to Simonstown. It would never go to Simonstown and be allowed into Simonstown if there was not high level approval and support for a very controversial visit like that. Simonstown Naval Base is, the least protected if you want to do something undercover. There are so many ex-military and ex-naval guys, residing against that mountain, Simonstown, so they can see everything that is going on down in the port, and that's why there were so many photographs and small videos and of everything that happened. That there's no secrecy in the eyes of the public and of us and the news media. It's only government that stays very numb about this. My theory is that similar to what happened with the Cuban medicine and drug situation, where we were also promised and assured initially that everything was above board, everything was legal, everything was regular, just to be put in a position where they were proven to be liars, basically, because it was irregular, it was illegal, it was unlawful. So everything was done wrong, and that was supported by the Auditor General of South Africa, by SAPRA, by the Public Protector's Office investigation, and it's now a subject of investigation by the National Prosecuting Authority. So it sounds like a very similar situation, and that's why, if it is fine and according to the book being done, no problem. If it is not, sorry, no mercy.
Okay, so I've followed the story quite a bit, and as far as I can gather, the purpose of the delivery was, as you very rightly said, arms ammunition from an order placed in 2020 when obviously the invasion of Ukraine hadn't occurred yet. So obviously there has been quite a bit of pressure on the South African government not to cooperate with the Russians, but as we both know, the South Africa is officially abstaining in the UN chambers and refuses to, should we say, ratify any forms of sanctions against it. Let's call them alliance partners. I don't know how else to describe them. They clearly still think the Russians are communist, and so are they. So they like mutual beneficial. I don't know. It's ANC logic. But the
Absolutely.
understanding now is that they've obviously taken delivery of this ship, which we understand, and from what we can gather, it's arms, as you said. We called this, by the way, when we first did the video. We suggested it was probably arms or drugs, maybe both. Um, so it does look like it is possibly arms ammunition for them. We know that obviously when we had the July peaceful protests, we're not allowed to call it anything else but peaceful protests.
Yeah.
That's YouTube's policy, not ours. Um, we know that a variety of ammunition was stolen from the harbours. We all know about the 10,000 missing rounds that was never recovered. Although I think Becky Selle found something like 100
Yeah.
rounds, and he was like, "Yay, I found 100
Yeah.
rounds." Okay,
Yeah.
so there's clearly a short supply. I suppose the big question is going to be they don't obviously want to cancel the order because they want to lube the Russian economy, which isn't doing very great because of the sanctions. And at the same time, there's probably a bit of pressure to accept it and look like they're friendly to the Russians, which might explain why there's been some secrecy. Because at the same time, they're also trying to cozy up to the Americans in order to score whatever free handout they can get in terms of
Yeah.
their Green New
Yeah.
Deal, which actually does take us on to the next story, which actually is around ESCOM and the deployment of troops to ESCOM. Ramon, this was your story, so over to you, my friend.
Yeah, indeed. So, Mr. Marais, SNDF, well, Andre de Ruyter was, kicked out as CEO thanks to William Montashe. And then soon thereafter, ESCOM says that they will deploy, well, not ESCOM, sorry, the presidency announced that they will deploy SANDF to protect power stations from terrorism, which is a real threat. A lot of the breakdowns are caused by terrorism, i.e., people purposefully picking apart the power stations on purpose. And then, of course, load shedding ensues. We read a few articles, we made a video about the fact that a lot of the experts around the SNDF say that they are woefully not prepared or outfitted in a way to make them legitimate defenders of power stations due to a variety of things. Namely, they can't really do arrests, and most importantly, they don't have the, what do you call it? Byron, I'll edit this out. What do you call it? They don't have the uh, they don't have
Well,
the
the
logistics to
the
deal with
the
Yeah,
manpower.
capabilities, the
so they're
resources.
technically so they're technically armed forces. They're not actually peace officers, so they can't enact a civilian arrest.
Yeah. So as Shadow Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, what are your views on the SNDF being deployed to do such things as to protect power stations? It doesn't seem to be something that is within the ambit of the SNDF, nor should it be, one would think.
Well, it depends on the level of that, of what is happening there. And I think this is probably where I differed with you in one of your videos, where I think the comment was made that even the DA said, "Yay, they were deployed," and that was absolutely not the facts and the truth. In fact, I'm on record right from the beginning to say that this is an indictment against the government, the police, and ESCOM, because the purpose of the employment, and I'll now get to a difference between employment and deployment. One of the objectives was to do crime prevention. Now, crime prevention is never, ever the task of the Defence Force. That is the job of the South African police and ESCOM's own security infrastructure and their facilities and their people. So to employ, which at that stage was basically not deployment as it was made out to be in the media, but it was they put certain amount of soldiers on standby to be deployed whenever it was required. And remember, that coincided with the first days of the ANC conference, where they were enormously under pressure on what do they do to address the ESCOM issues and the load shedding, etc. So funny enough, that first couple of days they were only put on standby and were not deployed. They were only an authorized employment. The objective was then also that when they got deployed, it was like 10 soldiers per power station. And to do crime prevention, I mean, we don't even have enough resources and manpower to do the primary functions of the Defence Force, and that is border patrols, regional security, protect the integrity of South Africa, look at maritime security. We don't have enough resources even to do that. And there were no additional money being authorized and approved at this stage. I must qualify that. If there will not be additional money, it will again be stealing from Peter to pay Paul at the expense of more capabilities of the Defence Force and defence readiness that will be compromised. So this is very much different from the insurrection attempts in July in KZN and Gauteng. It's a total different issue. And we can't compare the two. It is not at that level. We do not have the expertise of even our engineers in the Defence Force. Even they do great work where they are purposefully deployed, but not in this case. So they can basically do nothing other than assisting ESCOM's own security and SAP's for not doing their work properly. So we don't support that at all. This is waste of money. It's waste of resources. It is abusing, in my opinion, of the SANDF. Remember that although the Defence Force has no official major training and exercise modules for domestic and local deployment and urban deployment, they have started with some form of preparing a unit of soldiers to be deployed locally. So obviously they have now used some of them, which at least they are not so unprepared as they were with the July insurrections. But this is like a shotgun putting the trigger into the air, and hopefully some of the pellets might hopefully fall on the right spots, and it will have no effect whatsoever. So this is politics 101, abusing of the army for political purposes.
Okay, so we followed the story quite a bit for all sorts of logistical reasons. We did find it to be rather amusing because obviously all of the reports that had come out was that there was no logistical way for the army to actually fulfill the mandate. Now, as far as our understanding, just to correct ourselves, we understand that obviously the DA was calling for a state of disaster in relation to ESCOM, which obviously could have granted the president's emergency powers. And those emergency powers obviously mean that ultimately the president was able to do things like deploy the defense force to protect key infrastructure. So that was ultimately the way that we had described that the DA was, should we say, positive around the deployment. Now, whether was it actually positive around the actual deployment, well, we don't know because there wasn't much of a comment at the time. So thank you for setting us straight on that front. One of the things, though, that we did notice was obviously around the underfunding of the SANDF. We also noted around what the occurrence of around the July peaceful protests last year and around how that had gone. Obviously, it had gone spectacularly wrong. We also knew that there was issues around deployment, specifically around the training of the soldiers being trained to protect the borders and the security and integrity of South Africa as a state and not actually do specific law enforcement. But the government is under significant pressure to defend its key infrastructure that it's allowed to go to hell, basically. And obviously, we've now heard De Ruyter's being less than quiet now that he has actually resigned from his position. And De Ruyter's been very clear that Eskom is captured by a mafia syndicate, and that mafia syndicate does control the levers of power in terms of Eskom, and that he himself has been, should we say, defenseless to be able to defend the infrastructure of Eskom. Now, whether that be it being denied access to its own wholesaling contracts, its ability to wholesale its own diesel, whether it be denied the ability by the security forces to deploy its own security infrastructure, there's a number of ways in which that infrastructure has been left defenseless. And obviously the consequence of it now is, well, everything we can see. Now, we know that key infrastructure in the state has been left defenseless. And we've seen that specifically in terms of the railway tracks. I mean, the railway tracks, the reason a lot of the stations were looted and the tracks themselves were stolen was because obviously the cancellation of a defense contract for those. And they cancelled those contracts without providing any kind of replacement. It's part of the reason that we're very pro-gun in South Africa. And, we find the whole concept of the state taking away firearms for the purpose of self-defense and just leaving you with the police, the world's biggest laughable joke, because they're unable to provide protection for key infrastructure, let alone people. So, but that does actually come on then to a third story, which actually you've been discussing, which is actually around the pension regulations. So the ANC has recently had its conference, and as part of that, one of the things that they've decided to do is strip prior veterans of their pensions. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, thank you very much. About the pension regulations, on the 7th of December, the draft pension regulations for military veterans were published. Everybody that has got some knowledge of that will know that the Deputy President has been assigned some time ago, a year or two ago, to drive matters relating to military veterans and things that they are unhappy with. Most notably the pensions that was promised to them some time ago, houses, etc. So, and we have had regular meetings with the Department of Military Veterans, but there was kind of a parallel system going on. And I often got the idea that here's a political objective and an agenda rather than an operational one and kind of a social agenda looking at the welfare of all military veterans. Now, the Military Veterans Act is very clear about who and what can be defined as military veterans. And it clearly defines it as all those who have fought in the uniform forces of the old South Africa prior to 94, specifically the non-statutories, which is what is the freedom fighters, so-called MK, APLA, and those, and then the statutory forces, which is the old SADF plus the TBV States Defence Forces. Now, there was an assumption made, quite clearly very wrong, that everybody that served in the old SADF and the TBVC State Defence Forces received a pension, which is obviously so far from the truth, like the north from the south is departed. The old SACCs, we know that most of them were on contract, and those contracts ran out or was terminated prior to the elections, the new democracy. We also know that many of us who served as conscripts, as national servicemen, never got any pensions whatsoever, not even a bicycle. So we got nothing afterwards. And similarly are there members of the TBV Defence Forces as well. So clearly that this was totally wrong. They have been made aware of that. Although when and I remember even in Parliament in questions to the Deputy President, he assured me that I'm also a veteran and that all veterans will get benefits, the same benefits. When the regulations came out, it clearly was the objective was totally different. It was only defined as a military veteran in terms of the regulations, are only those belonging to the non-statutory forces. So, in other words, cutting out the
Military vets.
majority of the members of the Department of Military Veterans database.
Mm.
So only a relatively small portion are those from the old non-statutory forces.
Yeah.
So
Surprisingly,
clearly,
all ANC people.
absolutely. And remember, I've got a theory. Again, the I think with the ANC conference that week, starting that weekend, I know that they were under pressure. There were two camps in the ANC. The old Karel Niehaus's group, which is called the MK Military Veterans Association, and a lot of the old guard, really the old veterans, belong to that faction, if I can use that phrase. So I see it, and my theory is they wanted to get them on board, not get them to be, kind of revolutionary, and obviously get behind the president. And that is exactly what the regulations say. You guys
Mm.
are the selected few. You are the ones who must get this. And this is now in contrary to the Military Veterans Act, which we know that the regulations must give effect to the Act and not be in contravention of that. And also the same as with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. So clearly in this, and I've had a brief discussion with the Minister of Defence and Military Veterans on this matter. And I get the impression that some people jumped the gun by far, and that we will most probably see a withdrawal of the regulations. Remember, they've done it on the 7th of December, giving them 30 days to respond by the 6th of January. So most military veterans, and especially those very poor people from the old SACC and even from the old SADF, they don't have access to emails and computers and printers. So their organizations normally they've got also Christmas leave and New Year's leave. It means that come the 6th, nobody would have been responded, and that would have given them the free granting to say go ahead and make these regulations permanent. So and I've been very busy, had meetings with organizations, advised them on what to do. So there was an enormous response from the associations representing all military veterans, but specifically those from the old statutory forces. They've responded incredible, and all of them will make submissions via their organizations or in their individual capacities to basically object to these regulations.
Okay. Just for our audience, Ramon has had to drop off. Ramon is actually, for those of you wondering why Ramon's not talking much today, Ramon's actually a single parent. He's going to look after his baby. And
Yeah,
if you've ever heard Ramon on the streams, he's that
yeah,
baby can sing, like
yeah.
can sing. Anyway, just a quick one. So I actually read an article about this the other day, and they were suggesting that if you actually look at the state of South Africa's economy, we are now in the same state as the Zimbabwean economy was when it went into decline. And we are 3 years away. And if we take a parallel, they say we are now 3 years away from land invasions. Now, the land invasions in Zimbabwe were caused by the prior military veterans who didn't feel that the new regime had given them their right dispensation, and they felt that they had been under-supported. So a more cynical person may say that this is an attempt to alleviate those pressures and to provide for the former MK vets, the ANC vets.
Can I give you some statistics on military veterans with the Department of Military Veterans? If you look at the numbers, I mean, there's about 19,000, 9,000, which is non-military veterans, and then more than double that is from the old non-statutory, or from the old statutory forces. So even those who was on the database, and remember, no one that is not on the database can get any benefits. You have to be registered there. So in terms of those already on the database, it is a minority portion that they want to give this, and this is clearly a political objective.
They
Remember,
got money,
remember,
Minia. They got
Yeah,
no money, and they need to provide at least some form of
exactly.
increase on it. So the only, the ANC philosophy is you never grow a pie, you just redistribute it. So they
Yeah,
know that
exactly.
they've got a very specific pie, and all they need to do is cut out some people from the pie and then redistribute it between a smaller
But
number. It's the ANC
but
way,
remember, their objective is elections. They
100%.
only have got, and their support is dwindling, whether it is ANC congresses, elective congresses, or national provincial elections or local government elections. So everything that they do is with the objective of how they can regain some of their losses, or how can they optimize voters?
100%.
And all of these are speaking to that, which again
Yeah,
is abusing of the system for political
100%.
purposes, which is totally unacceptable, and which we will oppose vehemently.
Yeah, and Ramon has a very famous saying, and that is, stop thinking like a colonizer, because
Yeah,
you're trying to rationalize this, but this has nothing to do with
exactly,
rationalism.
exactly.
Colonizers rationalize, but
Yeah,
this all has to do with power and influence. And at the end of the day, all the ANC is really kind of cared about is how can they buy that vote? What
yeah,
what can they do? How can they redistribute any form of, should we say, funding that
yeah,
they have and apply it to
yeah,
something else in order to get them a favor? Look,
yeah,
nobody in the former regime, anybody who would have fought any of those wars, any former of the vets, are going to vote ANC. So they know that. So
yeah,
why bother providing them with a pension? Plus, that number's dwindling. It's a
yeah,
dwindling pool, and the
yeah,
majority
yeah,
of those people probably vote for the DA or Freedom Front Plus, and they
yeah,
know that. So they're like, okay, we
yeah,
need to
yeah.
firm up our own support and make sure they
Okay.
don't navigate towards the EFF or,
Yeah,
worst case scenario, just not vote at all, abstain.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
that's all they're doing. They're just providing
yeah,
that kind of backing.
yeah,
And you're
yeah.
right, it is abusing state funds, but I don't think any of our audience, and probably nobody in the DA, would ever go, the ANC doesn't abuse its position for its own personal gain. I mean, it's kind of like the tried and tested tool, isn't it?
Yeah, I can tell you. I mean, I've been on record, and I know a few times the minister has phoned me after a speech in Parliament, say, "Hey, you are angry, eh?" I said, "Well, I'm not so angry. I'm just enormously frustrated, because there's a huge difference between talk, 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 and do something. Don't just agree with me on many of these things. Let's do something about this. And if we don't change our priorities, we will never be able to utilize less money to better equip our defense force and our soldiers." Can I just respond just two issues that I just wanted to react to,
Of course.
that I just feel obliged to do? During the insurrections, in my opinion, the little bit of defense force deployment that we have had, I think, made a significant difference in KZN. I've had many, many people phoning me during that time, and I communicated to certain generals on the ground that still have got a very good relationship with. And then immediately when the armored vehicles moved into a specific area, the parents were saying, "Thank you very much. It's making a difference." So yes, it is probably bit more window dressing, but it still made a difference. And I think a lot of people gained some respect for the Defence Force. But again, that was also abuse. One of our conditions at that stage that I said to John Steenhuisen, I will support it provided that there are additional funds, additional to the budget for that purpose. And they then granted that. I think it was close to R1 billion, which was a good thing. I can also say that in terms of our current capabilities, our biggest challenge is with the Navy, where we know that we haven't got many Navy vessels that is operational. And the Minister of Finance has given a commitment that over the medium term they will provide us money to upgrade the frigates and the submarines, and to get two more new multi-mission inshore patrol vessels. Our Air Force is a major challenge. At least in terms of our army, we were able to pull off a divisional exercise of over 12,000 soldiers. We know many of them are reserve force members and not permanent force or regular force members. We can do nothing without reserve force members assisting regular force. We must also remember that the police, their personnel numbers are probably more than double that of the SANDF. And of the SANDF, only about 30 odd thousand are infantry related soldiers that you can basically deploy. I know that during the insurrections, they have used many people from admin staff, and I know that there's a lot of remarks by people in terms of how they look and their size and whether they are fit or not. But they've used every every Tom, Dick, and Harry and women to stand somewhere, giving the impression that the army has been deployed. But our special forces are still outstanding. We know that the few helicopters that we've got and the few pilots are outstanding. I've got so much respect for them. They are obviously totally under resourced. We sit with the majority of our aircraft that is on the ground purely because of budget and priority issues. And you have indicated about the economy. Obviously, if the economy is low, the government's priority is not defense force. It is education, it is health, it is
No,
welfare, it is
it
grant.
should be those things, but it's not.
Yeah,
It's
no,
it's
no,
how do they retain power? That's it.
yes,
That's it.
yes,
There's no other
absolutely.
priority to the ANC apart from how do they retain control.
Absolutely. And but when they do budgets, that is why they cut the defense force budget, but not necessarily the others. So
Hundred
whilst
percent.
we must have a more balanced way, what in my view, any defense force must be operational in support of one, your trade policies and trade interests, and also your foreign policies and foreign interests. At this stage, we've got a surplus balance of payments with the United States, European Union, and the UK, and we've got a negative balance of payments with Russia, China, and India, the BRICS countries. So we have to make sure that that balance is correct.
Yeah, but
And
they're commie,
currently,
mate. Like they're communists. So
yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
just chill out, man. They're one of the
just print,
guys.
just print more money, just print more money,
I
and
got I
it's
got
not
to
working like that.
I got to ask you one more question, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Sure,
Gonna put you on the spot.
sure.
Was to stop the Western Cape just getting its own army, defending its own territory, and telling the rest of South Africa to do one.
I don't think that's a practical solution. Obviously, whilst the Western Cape has got its own constitution, the only province with its own constitution, we know that for any territory or a province to become independent, you have to meet certain standards, and
No,
it
I
is
mean having its
impossible.
own army. It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
independent, but having
no,
its
no.
own army.
In terms of current legislation, constitution specifically, provides the defense force as a national imperative. So you can't just form your own paramilitary defense force. We must be honest. The Western Cape just do not have the money to establish his own defense force. That's costing a couple of billion rand in a year just to maintain. So it is just not worth it at this stage. And I mean, our objective as the official opposition and my objective is to look beyond the Western Cape. I mean, we can't be just an enclave right at the bottom of Africa. We have to look further. Eastern Cape, Limpopo, Free State, Northern Cape. We have to look further than maybe just our own small haven here in the southern tip of Africa.
Mm.
We have to play a much more constructive role, and I think it's very important that we have to make sure that those who can contribute on a national basis must be able to do so. And I do believe that there are many, many fantastic people in the Defence Force that can be an asset to a new dispensation going forward. If ever there was an opportunity and the right time for a coalition government to take over and also be responsible for the Defence Force, I know that we've got people. There are many people that do not deserve the positions that they've got, but there are many that I take my hat off that walk the extra mile, but they basically walk that extra mile proverbially with their hands tied behind their backs. And they are kind of under resourced in such a way that they are set up for failure.
Final question. Lesotho, is it
Yeah,
going to invade?
it's going to.
Is it going to
Just
invade?
repeat. No, I don't think so. I don't think Lesotho has got the capability to
You
invade.
saw the story, right? The story that they
Yeah,
want to reclaim parts of South African territory. It's
yeah,
just the
but
funniest
remember,
story ever.
yeah, but that's also in internal Lesotho politics, and obviously there are certain people who are trying to get into politics on that ticket that they want to reclaim land from South Africa. It is not recognized in the world. There's no way that South Africa will allow that, and I also know that our defence force will. I'm
Yeah.
quite confident that with the equipment at least that we've got. And although it might not be a many serviceable equipment, but those that we've got, I can tell you we can very easily take them on and make mincemeat of them.
Yeah, I don't know, my friends. There's some people in the Free State that would welcome a Lesotho invasion. They're like, anything's better than the ANC. But
Oh,
it's also an interesting story because the territory that Lesotho claims to have lost actually was taken by the Buntu people and the Zulu tribe. It actually had nothing to do with Jan. So we made a
exactly.
joke on the show that like, hey Jan, you're off the hook for once, my friend.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, absolutely. And I mean, those people that look at the history and what happened in a silo or in a selective way, and you have to look at holistically in terms of what happened, and also remember what and who is acknowledged and recognized internationally by the United Nations, etc. So you can't just come and invade. And I mean, with the greatest of respect to Lesotho, they are so dependent on us in terms of SACU, the money that we have to pay over every month to them. So you can close that taps immediately, and then with the greatest of respect, I know that our defence force hasn't got the best of images, but you can't compare ours to Lesotho. I mean, there's just no comparison with the greatest of respect.
It's still funny. We got a
Yeah,
good chuckle from it. Anyway,
yeah.
Mania, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you
We
very
really
much.
do appreciate your time, and hopefully our audience got something from your comments. As usual,
Yeah,
the DA is trying to do things right, while the ANC is trying to do things well for the ANC. So,
yeah. Well, I
well
can
done,
I
my
can
friend.
thank you very much, and I can assure you that no stone will be left unturned. Similarly with the Cuban medicine stuff and other issues that I've uncovered and turned over, we will not leave this one. And if I must do again issue a PIA application and go to the public protector myself with the evidence I've got, I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll even go again to the NPA.
Cool, man. Cool. Well, I'm going to end the interview here. Just stay on the line quickly, and then I'll speak to you again after. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you.